Welcome to Spaghetti on the Wall, where we throw ideas, see what sticks, and nurture those that do. I'm your host, Armando Leduc, an actor, entrepreneur, and coach, giving you insights that light up your world. We're here to explore the realms of business, marketing, and life, serving up a shot of inspiration with every episode. Ready to make ideas stick and grow them into something great? Let's dive in. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on when you are watching this podcast. I know some of you guys are live, but a lot of you listen to it once it hits Spotify and Apple Music and all of that good stuff. So back with another one. Re Perez, what's up, man?
Hey, so good to be with you today and following our time in Cabo together.
Oh, dude, Cabo was incredible. It was my first time in Cabo. Was that your first time in Cabo?
It was my third time. Yeah.
What an amazing spot. And so we had the privilege of hanging out at this Flow Mastermind. And let's talk about the Flow Mastermind for a quick second, because I've been to a bunch of masterminds over the years, and I really felt like that one was so intentional. You know, like some masterminds, you go there and you're like, you're learning, which, you know, you will learn, right? And you're going to pick stuff to implement. But there's always this feeling of, well, should I be trying to create deals? Or should I, you know what I mean? Like there's always that sort of trepidation. But with Flow, it was like, this is why you're here. This is the intentionality. Everybody needs to meet. How do we create deal flow? And I was just like, oh, I like that. Like, I really love that. What was your experience?
Yeah, same thing. It's so funny because ostensibly that's probably what you should be looking for when you're going to these types of entrepreneur events. And I've been in so many different kinds. I've never walked in with that perspective of like, oh, how can I create more deals? I always lead with who am I meant to cultivate a relationship with? Who can I drop in deep with? And then from that space, see what other business or personal opportunities arise from that. But I think there's something special about having the intention of high-performing entrepreneurs come together with that specific focus, because then it doesn't come out of left field when you're in the conversation of like, hey, what kind of deals are you working on? Or how can we collaborate? Or how can we embed our relationships so that we can create more value for the same ICP, for the same ideal customer profile? And so I thought that lended itself really well, not making it awkward, but also making it that much more an effective use of everyone's time.
It was great, right? And we all have that same driven personality. Have you ever read that book, Driven, by Dr. Doug Brackman, by chance?
I haven't, but I have heard it's like on my list of all the books that I like want to get, but I have not read it. So tell me. Yeah, I think you mentioned it when we were in Cabo. Yeah.
One of those moments where when you read something, you feel validated finally. Yeah. Like I grew up as a black sheep, you know, in the family, and it's just, Armando, why are you like this? And Armando, why do you think that way? And Armando, you know, and I read this book and I was like, holy smokes, there's other people like me out there. Amazing, right? This insatiable need for more, this insatiable need for growth, you know, and it was unapologetically so. And it was like, oh, wow, okay, cool. There's nothing wrong with me. I just am a driven person, right? With this feel, which was, you know, which was really fun. And I loved it. So, but with that being said, being in this driven environment, right, where that was the intention, was a really cool thing, right? Where you were like, yeah, how do we embed a referral partnership? And I've been able to like really connect with some awesome people over there, even if it turns into deals, whatever. I'm not, you know, not too concerned with that part of it. I just really enjoyed the people, right, and the amazing connections, and just, you know, you're like, oh wow, did we just become best friends? Like, holy shit. You know what I mean?
Case in point, we're here together, and listen, I'm sure there's a lot of people. I recognize some people that were on your list. We know some people in common, but we get to actually jam and have a conversation, spaghetti on the wall. But I think that came out, we just sort of bypassed all of the typical guards, I suppose, of like your team and my team and all that sort of stuff. And it's just like, hey, you want to do something cool together? And then here we are.
And here we are. So let me introduce Re, if you guys don't know who he is. author of Your Brand Should Be Gay, Even If You're Not, a bold and thought-provoking branding manifesto that challenges the status quo, which I think is really cool, through storytelling, real-world case studies, and bold insights. And he shows authenticity in branding that can drive exponential business growth and personal alignment. So with that being said, before we got on the call, you were talking about a 2-day retreat that you're putting on. Tell me about that, and then we'll go into the epiphany of how you got to where you got.
Gotcha. Okay, so zooming in just on that one piece, I was talking about how I have this vision. I've been in branding for 24 years, worked with Fortune 500 brands and worked with like thousands of entrepreneurs and small businesses across many different industries. And I really had this vision, particularly in the era of AI and particularly in the world where branding is so pervasive and anyone and everyone is claiming to say that they do branding. And for someone who's always looking to stand out, be different, be a step ahead of the game, I really want to lead a conversation that was above personal branding, that was above business branding. And the reality is it's this idea that, at least in the markets that I worked with entrepreneurs, founders, you need both a personal brand and you need a business brand. But more often than not, you probably have 2 or 3 brands that you're managing. Maybe you have a podcast brand. Maybe you have a book brand. You mentioned my book, right? Your brand should be gay, even if you're not. But then I also have a business brand, category 1 branding. And then I have a personal brand. And so that's really the landscape now, is how do you create an ecosystem of brands that leverage one another, that create a halo effect for one another, that may or may not, share the same customer profile, but they create an ecosystem of your world on how you're creating value in the world. And then the bigger conversation on top of that, because I'm always pushing to see like, what's the bigger context here, is that how do we link up with other ecosystem brands to create a bigger flywheel for deal flow, for opportunities, for creating value in the marketplace. And I think that's where I think the trend for brands is going to take place, at least, again, with the markets that I work with, particularly those who are transforming people's lives, transforming industries, and disrupting outdated models and paradigms. So the event is called Threshold, and it does borrow from like the Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, that part in the journey where the hero, in this case, the entrepreneur or founder, has to cross the threshold of who he or she is into he or she is becoming. And we always hear about the hero in terms of like their call to adventure, or when they're on the other side of crossing that threshold. But very rarely do we talk about those moments when you're faced with, or when you're at the precipice of having to cross the threshold. It can be scary. It can be daunting. It can be overwhelming. It might even scare people so much that they don't want to cross it, or they might be pushed across that threshold. And so I want to create a conversation and a container for people to powerfully do that with other people. We don't have to cross the threshold alone. In fact, I think the real opportunity is for us to cross that together as brands, as humans, as entrepreneurs, as leaders.
I'm going to treat this a little selfishly, because I tend to do that with the podcast. Because I was just talking to my team today about branding.
Yeah.
And specifically talking about, you were talking about your podcast brand, you're talking about your personal brand, you're talking about business brand. And I think that's, I've always had the idea where I'm like, oh, well, why don't we just build the Leduc Entertainment brand, and then I can put spaghetti on the wall in it, and I can put my personal brand in it. But that doesn't work, right? And so in your opinion, are you saying that I should be creating the Leduc Entertainment brand by itself with its own platforms, and then Spaghetti on the Wall by itself with its own platforms, and then Armando Leduc by itself with its own platforms. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, let me be mindful of, because I want to be careful when I suggest something, or when I make a recommendation, or when I'm just highlighting a concept. And so I'm going to put this in the category of, it is a framework. It depends is the short answer to your question, because what most people think that you should do is like everything should be the same, and it should be Leduc, media, and that's not necessarily the case. Like if I wanted to, my personal brand, so my name is Re Perez, but I didn't want to have a branding firm called Re Perez Branding, right? And I didn't want to write a book that was like the Re Perez memoir on branding, or, whatever. And so the point is, it just depends on who's the target audience and what is the business objective or desired outcome that you want for that particular offering. And but mostly it's like the target audience. If they're the same target audience, is great. If they're different, then maybe you need to, modify it or change it. But I think the reality is, particularly with creators and visionaries, it's okay to have a multiplicity of brands. The bigger question is, how do they complement one another, and how do they support one another? And you don't have to sound or be named the same in order to support one another. They can be complementary in nature. And that's the big distinction: complementary versus sameness. And so it could very well be that's the case, but there's something interesting about Spaghetti on the Wall. There's something interesting about your personal brand. What does your personal brand stand for? And it might think Richard Branson, right? There's a classic example where he's a personal brand and he cuts across many different industries, but the common thread is that he is a trailblazer. He is a pioneer. And so what's true to his personal brand is being an innovator, a trailblazer. And he can go into different industries with all different names and all different business focus. I almost said foci. Focus. But
focus is foci. I like
focuses. But the consistency is his brand, which is about innovation and pioneering. And so similarly, this, I do want to call this out, because most people think your brand is your logo, or they think it's the name of your company or product. Those are just visible aspects of a brand, but the brand is on top of all that, which is, what's the identity, what's the perception, what is the story that you are trying to create over time, and then you have different expressions of that brand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So the pain point for most businesses is that they're like, oh, I'm just going to throw a logo together, put a name out, create my social media platforms. But obviously there's a lot more to it when you're thinking about creating a brand and making sure that the foundation is solid so that you are moving forward and not confusing people, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And
well, yeah, go ahead.
No, well, so that's one of the biggest pain points. You got a lot of business owners that are, maybe they just started, startups, and they're like, oh, I don't necessarily know what a brand is, or what my brand is. And it isn't maybe until 5-10 years into the business where you go, oh, here's the brand, right? Or and obviously with somebody with your expertise, they can come in and help you obviously shortcut that process so that you're not, trying to reinvent yourself and confuse people as you're trying to grow the business.
Yeah. So the needs of a startup entrepreneur or startup business when it comes to branding is very different than more established businesses. I tend to work with more businesses that have already done their first million. So they have proof of concept. But when you're in the early stages, if your brand is a little bit of a moving target, you might have some clear intentions on how do you want to position yourself, how are you different in the market. But if you don't have proof of concept and you're self-funding your business, then more often than not, you are using your phrase, throwing spaghetti against the wall, to
That's
see
what I
what.
need back here. I'm gonna put spaghetti on back here, but just like actual spaghetti. Right.
Actual spaghetti, Italian spaghetti. So let's use this analogy here, because oftentimes some coaches or marketers will tell you, you don't need a brand when you're just starting out. You just need great marketing and great sales, which in a way, that's kind of true. But I also have worked with startups who have capital to invest and do it right the first time, because you get one chance to get it right. And if you're clear on what business you're trying to build, and then yeah, having a clear brand strategy to fulfill on that business is paramount, or it could be a game changer. So most people build a brand from the outside in approach. It's like, what does the market need and want? And let me create a business and therefore a brand to deliver on that need. The other side of the spectrum is building a brand from the inside out, which is what wants to, so usually, again, I work with founders and entrepreneurs. What is something that is within me that wants to create value in the marketplace? It's still going to solve a problem, but what's something that I can uniquely own and deliver, something that I want to solve, or a way that I want to create value and contribute in the world? And then that's met with this outside in approach. So now you're no longer just throwing spaghetti at the wall. You might be, what's the best analogy? I don't know, maybe you're throwing meatballs at the wall. No, but the point is that you don't have to throw as much spaghetti up against the wall to see what sticks. You're more likely than not throwing things that do stick, because you've went through the mental gymnastics of trying to figure out, who are you? Who are you trying to target? What is the differentiation, points of differentiation, and how do you want to position yourself? And what do you stand for, right? And so, now that being said, when you're starting out and you're not clear what kind of business you're building on, then yeah, I think you should focus on proof of concept. But when you're a bit more established, usually the problem that people are trying to solve is, okay, we have proof of concept. Now we need to optimize our marketing. Now we need to streamline all of our efforts, that where we bootstrapped it before, now it's becoming a mess. And now we need to streamline that so that we can have a lot more leverage in all of our branding and marketing collateral. Oh, or our marketing is not converting as well as it used to because our messaging is outdated, or our messaging is not clear, or it's all over the place. And what was working in ads is no longer working. And so there's a big difference when you put a stake in the ground and you say, this is who we are. And sometimes you're delivering on a need that the market didn't even know that it wanted. This is who you are, and this is what we stand for. And by the way, are you interested in taking advantage of what I have to offer?
Yeah. We grew massively, 90 days, right? We're a production company. We do the done for you, whatever you need production-wise, podcasting, the whole nine. When in November of last year, we said, you know what, guys, we're going to really focus our energy on legal and try to put ourselves out there in the legal space specifically. And It was at that point where we grew like extremely fast.
Yeah.
To your point, I don't necessarily know if we were branding that way, but we definitely had an intentionality where we're like, hey, here's the proof of concept. We've obviously helped PI attorneys and family law attorneys. We've done it well. People love what we do for them. And so it was a lot easier for us to sell, because we were like, oh, you did it for so-and-so, you did it for so-and-so, you can do it for me. Right. And so also it was a lot easier for us to send proposals, a lot easier for us to send landing pages. So what do you say to people, service-based businesses specifically? What do you say to them when they're like, well, my client avatar are businesses that are 5 million and up, right? How do you brand yourself that way?
Yeah, so I think the question that you're pointing to is, how niche should you be? Right? Is like, should you brand yourself as hyper niched, or should you allow yourself to be a little bit more broad so that you don't turn away some businesses? I think that's what you're pointing to.
Sure.
And it goes back to, for me, what is the strategy? And I'll use me as an example. So maybe if you're listening in, you can kind of find yourself in this. But when I first started my own agency 14 years ago, because I'm big into personal growth and development, and I believe in personal growth and human optimization, and I was attracting lots of coaches and consultants. And next thing you know, I was branding a lot of them. And at one point, I was like, wait a minute, I don't want to be known as just the branding agency for coaches and consultants. I want to have a diversified portfolio. I want to be known for branding. And so that led me to work with so many different industries, countless industries: property maintenance, crime scene, meth lab cleanup, an LSAT tutoring company, a landscaping company, a lawn care company.
Crime scene, meth lab cleanup?
Yes.
wait,
I just threw that in there.
You just glossed over that so easily. Wait, before you continue, I want to know a little bit more about that. What?
This is a funny story. So they're out in Tampa, Florida. The company is called Spalding Decon. And at the time, I was doing an audit of her brand. Her name is Laura Spalding. That's why it's called Spalding. And it had, her website was red. It was like this dark red, maroon red, kind of like the color of blood, right? And there was all these pictures on the website and on the social media that were crime scene, blood, brain, guts. And I said, Laura, no one wants to see that. And they're like, yeah, they do. People are up late at night. They have a voyeuristic mentality and they're searching these things. And I said, okay, I get that, but are these people paying you money? And she's like, well, no. So what is she doing? She was building what's called a B2C brand. She was trying to appeal to people, your everyday people. Who do you think her clients are? Who are the people that actually pay her money?
Police, FBI,
property managers.
Oh yeah,
insurance companies. So she was building a B2C brand when she really needed to build a B2B brand. And and so her tagline at the time was, when tragedy strikes, Spalding Decon is there to help. And so I said, well, rather than reminding people of the tragedy and that you're right there once it happens, why don't you get people to think about you if and before a tragedy were to strike? Similar mentality to an insurance company. And so we changed the positioning to restoring peace of mind. So it's the idea of restoring peace of mind if and when a tragedy should strike, that you have Spalding Decon who's going to be right there to clean up the mess. We changed the color palette to something that was more of a blue tone, for more calming, peace of mind kind of feel. And then we kind of created some other colors like orange and green for like meth lab cleanup and biohazard cleanup, things like that. And now she has multiple locations. I think probably nationwide. Her goal was to build a franchise model. But it's the same line of thinking that I do with any brand, which is, let's get clear on the who, what, and why first before anything. Who's the target audience? What's the problem that we're solving for them? And then why should they listen to you? And when you get clear on that, then all the other downstream things like design and logos and website, that's easier because now you know who you're talking to. So the principles are the same. I just have the fortunate opportunity to kind of go into many different industries and transform them. One of the most recent ones was an HVAC, plumbing, home services company. Like, I didn't go after these. These are referred businesses. And, that industry doesn't really do branding. It's more of a blue collar type of thing. And I transformed that brand, and it helped to attract it attracted their current, CEO or COO who now runs the company. It was like, oh yeah, there's a big opportunity here. They're actually saying that the whole home services industry is the next set of millionaires, right, in this industry. So
it's cool.
Anyway, I digress. But yeah, so I've worked with a lot of different industries. And what was my original point? So for me, I didn't want to be known as a branding agency for coaches and consultants. I wanted to have a diversified portfolio, and that lended itself to many different businesses to work on. Now, the pendulum does swing on the other side, because then I decided I really want to, I was working with like 40, 50 projects a year, and I was like, I'm just done with running an agency. And so now I have more of a consulting model, and I have a lot more leverage when I really focus on a very specific type of business. And they're usually service-based businesses. 80% of them are service-based businesses that have some sort of high ticket offer or offering. And they're established businesses. They're probably 3 million to 20 million in revenue, and they have a team of 8 to 10 people. But that's based on what do I want my business to look like that dictates the brand strategy. So for some people, being hyper niched does really well if they want to build a scalable, business. But for someone who values, again, different season, but if you value diversity and creativity, then you'll have a different strategy.
How do you, when somebody is, in the $3 million to $20 million range, do they feel like they need branding at that point? Or do they feel like they already have branding, right?
Yeah, well, I can only attest to the ones that, well, actually, okay, I can attest to both. I speak to some people where there's like problem aware, and then there's some people who are problem unaware. So let me first address the problem aware. Usually when people have reached a certain degree of success, what comes up for them is, okay, we've gotten here, but to get to this next level, we need to systematize, we need to protect our assets, trademarking, things like that. And we also need to create some more cohesion in producing creative, because now we don't have brand guidelines, our voice is all over the place, our graphics all over the place. So we're losing market share because we look diluted, we don't look professional enough, we're fragmented, we're creating so much energy just to produce something when we should have all this dialed up. And that happens when someone grows really fast. And then they wake up and they're like, oh, wait a minute, how did we get this far? So they're like, okay, let's take a step back in order to take a few steps forward. Now, for people who are problem unaware, they may not think they need a brand. They're like, hey, we just need to sell more, or we just need to put more money in marketing. And those people will eventually either find out that they're going to plateau at some point, whatever that threshold is, they will plateau if they don't make a shift. Or at some point, they're going to realize that, oh, wait a minute, we're not converting as well as we used to, and we need to solve that problem. They don't immediately think it's a branding problem. They think it's a staffing problem. They think it's a marketing or a sales problem. But when they come across the right person or someone like me, they'll say, you actually have a brand problem. You have an identity, you have a perception, you have a positioning problem, because there's a lot of people that are offering the same thing that you're doing, probably cheaper, maybe faster, and maybe better. And if you're not competing, if you're competing on price, you're always going to be competing on price. If you're going to be competing on, hey, you're better, then there's always going to be someone that says that you're better. If you're saying you're different, great that you're different, but I don't care if you're different. I just care that you solve my problem. So where I like to play with the brands that I work on is creating a category of one, like creating your own white space, creating your own category. That way you're not really competing with other people.
Right.
Anyway, that was just a side note to my philosophy, but that is that's usually sort of like when people say, I think I need to work on my brand.
Yeah. So tell me about, so the Threshold event is open for what kind of entrepreneur?
These are entrepreneurial leaders. So these are business CEOs, founders who are already established on some nature. Usually they're sort of second mountain kind of entrepreneurs. They've built some success already. And how they're approaching their life right now is they're building brands that at the fundamental level is making the world a better place. And that's elevating consciousness, that's making a difference, that's bringing in more joy, love, freedom, fulfillment in people's lives. And so it's my vision that we have a very important conversation of our time, which is an existential question, which is who must we now become in the era of AI and in the era of this new world that we're crossing a threshold to? Who do we need to come? Who do we need to become as entrepreneurs, as leaders, as humans, as founders, as brands? And so yeah, usually these are people who have multiple brands, a personal brand, a business brand, maybe many different other brands, and who are looking to latch onto and connect with other ecosystem of brands, because it's my vision that we create a bigger flywheel that is based on the human relationship and less on clicks and ads and all that sort of stuff. It's really at a fundamental level built on having great relationships.
It's amazing. Super intriguing. Where can they find out about it?
Well, all stuff right now is on my main site, reperez.com. And then there's a couple different portals, but it is sort of a private event at this time. So you have to kind of get on my newsletter list to kind of get access to those kinds of things. The reason I say that is because it's not for everyone. It's a curated experience. It's something that is not something you can just sign up for. You have to meet certain qualifications. So you do have to apply to participate in that. But yeah, everything is on my Re Perez website.
Re, I appreciate you, man.
I really do.
Really like the conversation. Super illuminating for me. I always like talking about brand because I'm always in sales mode for the most part. So yeah, brand is always something that I'm like, yes, branding for sure. And you hear it a lot. So I'm definitely in your ecosystem. So we'll be talking.
Yes.
I appreciate you being here. You guys check out Re, follow him on his platforms. Really cool stuff. Love what you're doing, and read the book. I'm going to read it here next week. I've tried to read a book a week, so that's the book for next week.
I have a signed copy of my book, the hardcover copy of my book, on its way to you. But yeah, I really wrote that book with the vision of inspiring people, because the book is about brand authenticity.
Uh-huh.
But I don't get the same reaction. If I just wrote a book, how to create an authentic brand, I'm not going to get the same reaction if I do when you have a book title called Your Brand Should Be Gay, even if you're not. Right. And so I'm kind of teaching on a meta level the power of branding, which is to stand out and be bold and be authentic.
I love it. Love it so much. Re, appreciate it. Thank you for being here. And Spaghetti on the Wall, brought to you by LaDuke Entertainment. For all of your production needs, podcasts, organic, social, you name it, we got you. Keep watching, keep listening, and we'll see y'all next time.